Hi guys, back again here in the middle of a blustery February. And what do you do in a blustery February? Well, you go to see your friend John and teammate, John Crook that is, racer in the Canadian Lightweight National Championship. I had a chance to visit with him and talk about last season and the upcoming season.
The 2020 race season coming up and the 2019 previous race season. Why we're at where we're at.
Yeah.
Yamaha R3, stock engine, stock motor, stock suspension. The only thing we had was a Hindle pipe and a K&N exhaust. So running the first regional, I forget where I finished, but a clean race. It's a very competitive class, pretty much the biggest class out there. And it's getting bigger. There's a lot of competition, there's a lot of bikes, a lot of riders. Well, lightweight competition is where it's at. Affordable racing, it's a great starting point, and for us, it's a great ending point.
Get back into it point, I guess you could
Or
say.
get back into it point.
Yeah.
Quite a few returning riders, quite a few riders have been riding racing since the 80s. Because the class is so competitive, I found myself scrambling and sort of behind the eight ball many times, where I took to the bike very quickly. The feel is there. I mean, I found the corners, I was able to hold quite a good pace in the corners.
Okay.
But during the races, I'd find the straightaways were was the weak point for us, yeah.
Lots need to be done there.
You spend a lot of work getting by somebody into a corner, late braking them into a corner, and on the straightaway they get you back. So it's a bit soul destroying. CTMP, yeah. Great track, a lot of elevation changes, very, very fast track, very little braking. So you have to know not to use the brakes.
Yeah.
And we knew the track quite well, and we know there's a lot of elevation changes, and knowing that, we knew that the stock suspension was going to suffer. So we invested in Olin suspension prior to that race, the national race at Mossport. We went to the track, set it up quite quickly because of our knowledge, and it was quite stiff though. We set it up quite stiff, which that track, it suits a stiff setup for that track. And the bike held its line, and the only thing lacking, of course, was horsepower. And we did get some horsepower numbers from that bike during stock. And the reason why we have horsepower numbers is because CSBK has a dyno. If you dial over 42 horsepower, you get penalized. So there is a 42 horsepower limit. There was another racer that I got by during the invitational round, but in the national round in the same weekend, because you race a couple of races there, one called an invitational.
Yeah.
In the invitational, I pulled a move at the very last corner on the inside, got by just on sheer corner speed. I got by from another racer or another competitor that has more power, more horsepower than I had, and was able to not win that race, but get by that competitor in that race. During the national race, I tried the same move and I got cut off, and I had to let up and let that racer by. But it was all good, all fun. But it did show me my shortfall of horsepower, and which led me into sort of having to spend more money on the bike. So I pulled the motor from the chassis myself, and we actually took the motor to Gord Bush Performance. And I have a friend who is an engine builder. His name is Jordan. And Jordan has worked at many places throughout the years, one of them being Honda Canada. So we were able to bring the motor to Gord Bush's shop, machine shop, and tear down the motor and build it all back up in one day pretty much, using all of his facility and machines.
Yeah.
We were there, so it's fantastic to do that. And they allowed me to shoot some of the footage while the work was being done.
Yeah.
So we milled the head slightly, and Gord Bush himself used his magic artwork on the head, doing some porting. And thank you, Gord. It's a marvelous job, I'm sure. And I'm sure the season will show some results for that. Motor's back in, yeah, and I did the first startup, and the motor sounds fine, the bike sounds fine. So now we're going to do the full circuit. First time doing all the rounds and learning new tracks that we haven't been to yet, which I'm not so afraid of because I think I take to new tracks fairly well. And especially if you're with me, Jeff, coaching me as you do sometimes, as well as other riders. Setting up for new tracks shouldn't be so daunting. Should be fun. Okay. Well, I'm a fairly clean racer in general. Crashes or offs on the bike are fairly infrequent when I'm out there, except for when I'm in the rain. In the wet, I'm not so lucky. Usually I low side somewhere, get too much confidence out there. But the last round, the last regional round, I find the older I get, the more I'm willing to spend on safety equipment. Yeah. Prior to returning to racing, I invested in a Dainese D-Air race suit, which as you know is a full race suit with an airbag inside. And the airbag goes off if you have an off on the bike. And this is MotoGP technology. It's an affordable investment. Right. So we made that investment. So we run nothing but the best safety equipment that we can get our hands on. And an Arai helmet. I've always liked Arai helmets and I like the way they manufacture them. I know that a lot of their work is done by hand and there's no replacing that, believe me. So I did have an off. It was a Saturday heat race. Yeah. I found myself trying to make up for my lack of horsepower. And we're several laps into the race, less than a second between us all. And off the fast back straight, I was in sixth gear, full pinned. I went in extremely late, past the 100 marker, which I usually wait for, down to fifth gear, touch the brake slightly, and bend the bike in. But I went deeper this time. One of the riders in front of me, who I know he has far more horsepower, right behind his back wheel, and I had a slight hiccup where the bike wasn't tracking. I was going in way too hot. Within that split second, I found that I wasn't going to make that corner. So I stood the bike up and I rode straight over the curb. I was still up, riding it out off-road. We estimate about 160 kilometers an hour. The reason why we sort of know that speed is because the D-Air suit has a download capability. It shows you your track, where you went off track, and some GPS data showing what you're doing. So from what we can tell you, I was probably going about 160 kilometers an hour off-road, which is not great to do at Shannonville because it's extremely rough. And the marshals tell me there's an entrance road for returning back to the track. I cleared that entrance road completely in the air, which means I hit that curb, I was in the air, cleared that road, and then landed. And I couldn't hold the steering, and the steering tucked. Bike going this way, me going that way. Tumbling, my head went in to the dirt, and the D-Air suit went off, which gives you one of those. And I tucked, I rolled a little bit. That was it, I was stopped. And the marshals came over. They could see that it was a fairly high-speed crash. I didn't pick up the bike. I stood up and I walked over to the fence and sort of just held my own there for a few minutes. I was able to get over to the bike. The bodywork was a mess, but she started up. I rode the bike back to the pits. I don't necessarily recall riding the bike back to the pits, but I did. I got to an area where you were standing and I gave you the bike and then I walked back to the pits. My helmet was damaged. My suit, however, was pretty much undamaged, and all I have to do is get the suit repacked. We have a local dealer, Rider's Choice. They'll repack the suit and give it back to me for a fee, of course, but nowhere near the fee that I had to pay going back to California. Another Arai is on its way, and there we go. Repacked suit and a new Arai helmet. Fresh engine. It should be a great season, Jeff.